I got one thing that I'm going to talk about consistency over time. What I see happen in real estate is agents, for whatever reason, they get into the business and they go, how much do you want to make? I want to make $100,000. And they've never understood how they have to work, how much they have to work, how hard they have to work, the time and consistency it gets to get to that point. If this business was that easy, that everybody in here made $100,000 because they said they wanted to, and they go, I like looking at homes and I like people. And then they get into it and they fall on their face and they go, oh my God, nobody's working with me and I don't want to role play or script practice all that shit. So here's what you got to do. It's through CANI. That's by Tony Robbins, C-A-N-I. Constant and never ending improvement. So guys, if you're new to the business, and a lot of you are, and when I say new to the business, that means you've been in the business less than 3 to 4 years. If you think it's going to be easy, it's not. But consistency over time, plan on it taking time, adjusting, working at your craft, role-playing, practicing, adding, subtracting, losing, winning. You keep focused on growing and getting better each day, and you will eventually reach what you seek. And this is the number one thing that I wanted to say today. It is never easy to make a lot of money, and it shouldn't be, right? And then the other part is, if you do it consistently over time, then you will build a foundation out that it is repeatable and duplicatable versus a one-hit wonder where you went out and had a phenomenal year and you didn't really put the practices in place that you needed to. And those agents will have a spike and then they will have a cliff. And you don't want to be doing that. You want to take this business seriously, because over time it can work out to be a phenomenal business for you. But if you don't put those practices in place, it will be a painful business, it will cost you a lot of money, and it will not be a good proposition. So let's simplify everything with NAR settlement. Decoupling. I want you guys to think about this for a second. This is the basis of the suit, is to decouple buyer's agent's commission and selling agent's commission, period. So fundamentally, what the lawsuit was intended to do is separate those two. So the buyer side will negotiate with their side, just like the listing agent does on their side, period. Where we are going with this and where it is going to go is they're going to decouple those regardless how you feel about it. Guess what? The DOJ and the NAR settlement, they don't give a shit about what your feelings are, okay? And even though I don't believe that this is in the best interest of the consumer, we as Georgia, the state of Georgia, we have been operating more in line. See, not all states had to have a buyer's agency agreement. We, through Beretta, we have to have a buyer's agency agreement for our state. We just would always wait until the time the contract was being written and go, oh, I need you to sign this buyer's agency form. 90% of agents, that's what they did. Very few ever went out there and said, I'm going to have this signed before I enter into a contract, okay? So, one question I heard online the other day when I was listening to a thing, I said, why would you want to have someone else negotiate on your behalf as they are today? So right now, you have weak listing agents that'll go out there and they'll say, hey, you want to pay 1.5% to the buyer's agent? They'll put 1.5%, they'll put 2%, they'll put 2.5%. That's all fine and good. But right now, if you go out there and you're looking at listings and you go, well, that listing, they're paying 2%. Am I going to get into a weird conversation with my buyer? Or am I going to go show them that home? Most of you will go show that home, or you might go, I'm not going to go show anything less than 3%, which is another reason why the lawsuit even came into existence. That's what's called steering, okay? I'm going to steer them away from that listing because it's not paying me enough. Some agents, I hope to God none in this company, operate that way, right? You should never not show somebody a home because of what the pay is. You can always negotiate what you need to get out of it, or have them compensate you outside of that. So why would you want somebody else to negotiate on your behalf as they are today? And as a listing agent, why are you trying to read the mind of the business practice of a buyer's agent and the buyer, and the same goes for the buy side, and making assumptions about the other side? So if I go out today, I can tell you, and represent a buyer, I would not be calling agents and saying, what's the commission? I wouldn't want anything back. I wouldn't worry about the F-258. I'd be going out and showing homes, and I would be negotiating my commission in the contract when I present the offer. That is the way that it's supposed to be going as of August 17th, period, okay? So I wanted to have a very simple conversation and break this down and just go, hey guys, simply this is what it's about, okay? Decoupling means separating the two. So why should a listing agent go into a listing and go, I feel so compelled that I'm going to fight like hell for the buyer's agent commission because we are realtors and we are so good and why should I feel compelled to do that when the whole thing that we're going is decoupling those two? You go on a listing appointment, you fight for your marketing fee. As buyer's agent, I'm going to go out there and negotiate my fee with the buyer and the seller most likely. Okay? I can write it in the offer. There's nothing that says that I can't. So if I called an agent, I called Jeff. Hey, Jeff, what are you paying on this home? Jeff says, I'm paying the buyer's agent 2%. That's all I can get the seller to do. Now I've got to go have a difficult conversation with the buyer. I got to have Jeff send over the 258 form, which hopefully he does. Maybe Jeff picked up the phone that day. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he sent over the form F258. Maybe he didn't. Now I've got to go have a difficult conversation with the buyer. And then what's my stance going to be? Well, Tess, I'm going to have you pay the 1% difference if I'm going to hold tight on the 3%, or I'm going to eat my words that I said in the sales meeting because I'm really not that strong and I'm going to say I'll take it for 2%. Right? It's one or the other. I don't care what your practice is, as long as you're legal, moral, and ethical. We got space for you here, and we'll help you be the best version of yourself. But I want you guys to think about what the actual suit was about. Decoupling. Stop thinking about the way that it is, the way that it's been, and realize where we're going and what's not going to stop. The biggest word that I've heard is friction. In almost every single thing that I've listened to about this, the word friction gets brought up, and the top people are going, hey, look at it from a consumer, look at it from a buyer's perspective in this new world that we're in, and look for ways to reduce the friction between you and them. Break down those walls, make it easier. You'll build out a lot more relationships, which will lead to, what do relationships lead to if you do a decent job?
Deals.
Referrals. So if you want to build out your referrals, which is the end goal of everybody in here, who would like to build out a business for 20 years and all of a sudden you got all these calls coming to you and you're going, I don't do online leads anymore. I don't do shit. You know what I do? I pick up the damn phone and answer the call from people that are referrals because now I'm just working my database. That's the ultimate goal. So think about what's up here, and I want you to remember this sentence right here. I want this to be drilled in your head. It never gets easier, you just get better. So if you're finding a lot of difficulty with this and you're going, oh God, then you're choosing not to get better. Okay? Which makes no sense to me, by the way. I've been looking at this so many different ways. I'm going, what would I want to be doing? I'd want to have every buyer when they meet me go, I feel relaxed around this dude. I don't feel like I'm being locked into a long-term contract. I don't know him from Adam. We're just having a cup of coffee. And do I want to work with him further? Well, if I can reduce down any friction, then you're going to want and you'll be willing to work with me more, where other agents that are out there trying to ram stuff down your throat and say, you're going to have to pay me 3%, blah, 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 blah. Who are you going to want to work with? The one that provides the less friction for you. Now that is on the side, got two different ways. That's on the side of people that don't know me from Adam. It's a sign call, it's a random call, it's an online lead, but your sphere of influence, your referrals, those I believe are different, and I would go for the buyer's agency, full-fledged conversation. Let's meet, sit down, go over your objectives. But the other one, I'm kind of meeting you out in the field, if you will, and I gotta handle those equations differently, in my opinion. Dusty and I are in our online leads. We're going to be handling the initial calls with our ISAs, and we will be going about it of the approach of, hey, we're just going to have you sign a customer agreement, not a buyer's brokerage agreement. We want to get to know you, right? We want to build a relationship before we have the buyer's agency agreement signed. Here's how we're going to operate, and we will break down those walls. I'm letting y'all know so that if you get leads from us, you need to understand this is what we will be doing. And by the way, if you think about it, it's really taking it to the same as what it is today, right? Today, before all this mess started, you'd go out and you'd meet people. Would you show them homes? How many of y'all, as your business practice before all this mess started, how many of y'all had a practice that before you showed one home, you had them sign a buyer's agency agreement? Raise your hand. Okay. So if you went out the door right now today and you wouldn't have them sign a buyer's agency agreement signed, then how's your 3% commission protected if that's your game? It's not. So why all of a sudden did this change have you guys go up? Changing my whole model. Makes no sense. So I just want you to think about it. The new forms came out and people are now starting to write contracts or listings and the new verbiage is in there, right? And you're going, what the heck? If you read over the paragraphs and the sentences that these wonderful attorneys wrote, you go, shit, I'm confused. And I admit, I was confused. So yesterday, Christina called and she's like, hey, I got a question. In the boxes, bless you, in the boxes, it says up top that I'm going to charge the buyer this much commission or compensation if they work with me, right? And we had talked about a fee that would protect her if originally we were talking with Tom Gillette about, hey, if you let's say you did a customer engagement and you said, hey, I'm going to work with you about a week, it doesn't have to be a specific time, but if I show you homes, I'm going to ask the seller to pay the compensation. If the seller refuses to pay compensation, I'm going to ask you to pay X dollars for me writing the contract and getting you a closing, right? Whatever that fee would be, that's up to you. You could write $1, you could write $500, you could write $1,500, you could write $2,000, right? You're writing whatever you want. But if I said, hey, this is the fee that if the seller's not going to pay me, I'm going to write this in there. The question was, if you write that in there, is that going to limit you to that dollar amount that you can collect, right? It is if I don't check the next box down, which is I'm going to ask the seller to compensate me 3% commission or whatever your fee is going to be, right? And then you got to check the third box, which I talked to Tom Gillette yesterday. He goes, make sure you check the third box, which says whatever you collect from the seller is going to be credited towards what the buyer would owe. So if my fee is $1,500 to a buyer, if the seller will not pay me a dime, but then I go get the seller to pay me 3%, that will wipe out the $1,500. The buyer will not owe me anything. Okay, I'm getting all my money from the seller, right? So that is the answer. If you want to begin the conversation with the NAR suit, I heard these two questions and I liked them a lot. The main comment was, do not over-explain this stuff. If you over-explain it and you want to get in and go, well, let me tell you all about it, and then guess what they're going to do? They're going to go, shit, this sounds complicated. I need to go do my own research before I do anything because you're making it sound really messy. And I got to protect my own interests, so I'm going to withdraw and I'm not going to sign anything with you. I'm going to go do my own research. So you can simplify it down, but you can start off saying, has anyone taken the time to explain to you the new process required to review homes, right? That was straight from Tom Ferry. And I was like, hey, that's a nice soft way of asking it. And the other one was a team leader that they are fully into. They've had 108 contracts signed with buyers. And their number one thing that they ask is, what do you understand about the NAR settlement? And having the consumer tell you what, they probably have a little bit of misinformation, but most of them, if they're buying, have heard they're probably going to have the responsibility of paying the buyer's agent's commission themselves. So it gives you an opportunity to start a simple conversation, keep it simple, put yourself in the buyer's shoes, find friction points, and simplify the friction points, right? So just look at it and go, what would my fears be as a consumer? And now as an agent, let me go out there with that understanding. And if I am that person, what would I want communicated to me to make it easy for me to go forward, right? I believe in the GAR contracts. Our state has operated differently than many other states. So across the country, not all states have had to have buyer's agency agreements signed. Not all state agencies were run the way that we were or had attorneys that were as good as what ours were. And so I believe our forms and our agreements are light years ahead of other entities. But you do need to understand that there will be other iterations out there. And I want you guys using right now the forms that we have from Georgia Realtors Association, okay? And those are what's in .loop, that's what's in the FMLS forms, and that's the makeup of everything, okay? That's what scares me about what we're going through. Are agents like that that'll go out there and take this and misinform people and have them sign a long-term agreement that now they're in a buyer's agency agreement that they're bound by that and they'll owe commissions if they buy anything from anybody during that time period. That's going to happen. Actually, I've heard that happening out in Colorado, and that's one of the reasons why their state association was really saying, hey, we don't like this at all, and we don't want our agents to have to sign these forms with the consumer because it's the worst thing for the consumer. I just look at it and say we're going to make it easy for the consumer, and that's what our direction is going to be. If you want to try and get everybody to sign a buyer's agency full-fledged with you, that is your call. I think it's being, and for people that don't really know you, I think it's being short-sighted to think that you can convince some person to sign an 8-page legally binding document with you before they go see a home. If you sign, good question, customer engagement form or whatever it is, you're treating them as a customer, so you cannot give them everything as you would as a client. And that is part of the shift of going, hey, right now while we're getting to know each other, I'm going to use this customer engagement form, and we're going to date. We're going to get to know each other, right? I'm not locking you into a long-term agreement. After about a week of working together, you're going to know you're going to want to work with me. And at that point in time, we'll need to sign a buyer's agency agreement to go ahead and move forward with everything. That's about the practice that I would be going in. I would not work on a customer engagement form forever. I would want to have them more attached to me, but also have the right to treat them like a client and giving them all the information that they need. Let's talk about what's going on. Keep in mind, guys, I'm sharing these numbers with you weekly because they're changing weekly. And this is huge when you're talking to buyers and sellers. As a matter of fact, one of the things that they're indicating in the what people are saying for the NAR settlement is, hey, you need to treat the buyer's meeting, when you meet buyers you don't know, treat it like a listing presentation. So I'd be going in armed with these freaking charts I show you guys every single week. And I'd be going, hey, let me tell you what's going on in the market, because as a buyer right now, if I'm just getting engaged in the market, I'm gonna get that buyer excited. You know why? Because the next 3 to 6 months looks like it's poised to be a buyer's pool, not a seller's pool. And when you lay these things out, if I'm looking at buying, I'm going to be excited and go, yes, I want to be buying during that time versus the time where the prices go back up. Because the next 3 to 6 months, historically, factually, data-driven, everything I'm going to show you shows that if you're buying, now's the best time to buy versus the spring and summer when everybody's jumping on. So, and by the way, rates are also down a little bit. So, number of, the one word that's not in there, number of new listings for last week. This is across the country. Number of new listings for last week over the previous several years. 2024, so this is actually last week. 2024 is an inch above 2023 and still under 2022. Go ahead. Some of these are charts, some of them are paragraphs. Weekly inventory change. We are up to 677,246 homes available across the country right now. Who can tell me what's so significant about that? Probably nobody. So let me go ahead and tell you. That means that we have surpassed 2020's numbers for the first 2 weeks. And that is a remarkable thing. I do have that graphed off for you so that you can show people. But look at the other numbers and what they reflect. The all-time inventory bottom was 2 years ago for this last week, and that was $240,497. The yearly inventory peak so far for 2024, and this guy that watches this stuff for Altos, he believes that last week will be our inventory peak, and it'll start kind of either staying right there or starting to fall off. 3 months ago, he was saying that we will get above 700,000 by October. Now he's saying that it's probably going to level off and start going down. For some context of active listings this week in 2015, just 9 years ago, there were 1.2 million homes available. Okay? That's pretty interesting stuff. That tells you we got a long way to go, right? So if you're a doomsday person, I can show you, nope, this isn't doomsday because we are still 500,000 plus inventory less than we were back in 2015. And by the way, 2015 was a pretty decent year for real estate sales in the country. So for doomsday sayers, I can go, hey, our supply is still well in check, that we're not going to see a cliff right now. Of course, that can always change. But the probability of us seeing a cliff is greatly reduced because our inventory is so significantly lower than 2015 numbers were at 1.2 million. Go ahead, Noel. This is what the chart goes along right with that thing. 2024, you can see the last 4 years have all been lower inventory, and now all of a sudden we are healthily rising above, and that line that went down, that was 2020 when COVID started. And after April, the numbers go down on supply of single-family residential properties. So now, 2024, we have finally surpassed, and now we are at the highest number of the last 4 years. That is vitally important that you understand that and share that with people. Go ahead. Percent of properties with recent price reductions. So here's what I'm excited about. I would get my head wrapped around this. If I have listings or if I'm talking to sellers in the next couple months that need to sell today or soon, I can leverage every one of these charts and say, as a seller, do not try to get spring pricing. As a seller, do not be passive about painting, carpeting, and doing all the things to get your home in tip-top shape. As a seller, do not wait on price reductions. Jump on it, get on it, do a 2-week crash course versus waiting 30 to 45 days to even talk about it. Get in your sellers' minds. Now is the time to be aggressive, not passive, to get your home sold, not sit. The further you go through this year, every single chart shows definitively sales pace goes down. Guess what happens with the pricing? It follows suit every single year. So I can tell a seller, hey, you're better off selling closer to the peak than waiting and hoping that next year we cycle back around and we inch. And by the way, the last 2 years, our pricing has done the exact same as what it did the year before. So if you sit there going, I'm gonna wait for next year and the prices will be higher, the chances of that happening are not good. As the supply has started to come back up, the prices and the catapulting of the prices has flattened off. Go ahead. And by the way, I know that y'all are going, hey, can we go back and talk about the NAR settlement? No. This is the shit that's going to set you guys apart. And if you meet a buyer and you go out there and say, let me tell you what's going on in the market. Let me share with you why I would be excited if I were sitting in your shoes and not a seller's shoes. And if I'm a selling agent or a listing agent, I'm going out and saying, let me share with you why you can't wait for the prices to go up, because the likelihood of that happening is slim to none, right? By the way, in my assessment, what would it take to have the pricing, have demand increase so much and pricing go back up from where it's heading right now for the next 3 to 6 months? It would take the interest rates getting below 6% to have that much excitement wrapped into the housing market to have that happen. What's the likelihood of that happening? Not really good. By the way, the rates have come down from 7, they're in the high 6s, and we still haven't seen that demand spike back up. We've seen interest get back out there, but nobody's really acting and jumping on things. I was in a conversation yesterday with some agents going, seems like the buyers just aren't really motivated like they were. They all know it. They're kind of pulling back and going, hey, I like that home. I'm waiting to see if something else comes on. I'm waiting to see if they lower their price. I'm waiting to see what the interest rates do. Because everybody's seen what they're predicting with the interest rates, which is everybody's saying they're probably going to keep going down, right? By the way, I've got some charts and graphs on here for you too. This is your total home sales contracts pending, future sales, right? Guys, you can just see it's plain as day. It is such simple math, simple graph, and simple explanation. If you guys aren't leveraging this for buyers and for sellers, you're really missing out on some phenomenal opportunities. And some agents will see that and go, oh my God, the pendings are going down. I look at that and go, I get excited. Let me go out there and get some buyers really revved up. That's what we need. Go ahead. I've talked about the mortgages and mortgage spreads. I've got this paragraph and I wanted to put it up here so that you guys can firmly grasp this. This is pretty cool. Imagine if mortgage spreads had, by the way, you know that the mortgage today, the 30-year rate, you got the 10-year treasury bill, and then the mortgage spread is what creates the 30-year rate, okay? Both of those have been high, which has caused the rates to go up. But the mortgage spreads, if they hadn't improved this year, we would have had a totally different story today in the housing market. If mortgage spreads were typical, what they have been, we would be, now this is huge. I want you guys to understand this. If mortgage spreads have been what they have been historically on average, our rates would right now be below 6%. But that mortgage spread is higher right now because of all the uncertainty going on in the economy. Now they could go out there and they could reduce that down real quickly, but right now what's holding the rates up is the mortgage spread and the 10-year Treasury bill. But if the spread was what it has been up until the last recent years, we would right now be below 6%. That is huge. And by the way, I'd be sharing this with the buyers because they need to know, hey, you know what you're talking about, and they're kind of like course correcting things. So if we took the worst levels of the spreads from 2023 and incorporated those today, the mortgage rates would be 0.58% higher. So that means things are getting better on both sides, even though the 10-year Treasury bills are about to come down just a hair, but the yield has come down a little bit. Go ahead. So this shows you the 10-year Treasury yield. And you can see it's bouncing. Overall for this year, it's come down a little bit, but it did go up just a little bit last week because we had a little bit better news. Go ahead. And this is the 10-year this is the spread. And you can see that's going down just a little bit. That's good. If we can keep that going down just a little bit, it's going to do nothing but help keep the rates in check or go down. Go ahead to the last one. This is the last chart. But I wanted you guys to be able to have some stuff that you could read or just send to your people this week. It's prime time this week for economic data and the Fed meeting. What else can you ask for when the 10-year Treasury yield and the key 4.2 level, meaning the 10-year Treasury yield's at 4.2. We not only have jobs this week and a Fed meeting, we have home price data, pending home sales, and data from a key Fed wage tracker known as Employment Cash Index. Then he talks about his Monday's podcast and how critical the verbiage is from the Federal Reserve meetings. That's what's on docket for this week, right? That may have an effect on interest rates and it may not. We won't know until this week happens. We don't even know what the Federal Reserve meeting is going to be and how they're going to communicate what they're going to communicate, but this is stuff to watch. I'm going to start bringing these little paragraphs into you guys so that you can easily have communication with your buyers and sellers. But I can tell you this in my heart of hearts. I liken it to this. If you're working with listings, right? If you have the confidence and you have the charts and the graphs and you have somebody that's been resistant, if they're not motivated, now's not the time to keep them listed. If they're motivated and they need to sell, then you got to imagine this in your head. This is not the time to kind of go put your arm around them. This is the time to take your two fingers, stick it up their damn nose, and lead them down the path. That's where we are. Leverage this in your business. Take these charts and go, let me read these paragraphs that Terry's now putting in this stuff. I believe one thing, the better you can get at communicating and leading people down the path, the better off your business is going to be.